Hi, welcome.
Hi.
Welcome to Green Apple Books. I'm Brendan McHugh. I'm a bookseller here, and I am very excited tonight to welcome you for this event with Nina Schuyler and their conversation partner, Lewis Buzbee. Let's give them a round of applause. So the reason we are here tonight is for Nina's new collection, In This Ravishing World. We'll then have a reading. There will be a dialogue. And then after the dialogue, there will be time for all of you to ask them questions. And then I believe that Nina is up for signing books after this. Yeah? Okay, no pressure. I'm technically supposed to ask that before, but I was like, that's cool. All right, local legends, both of them. All right, so before I introduce them, I want to thank you for joining us in person as well as online. And I'm going to take care of some business. So one, I want to start off by acknowledging that we are an unceded Ramaytush Ohlone land. And I hope you join Green Apple in our pledge to turn land acknowledgement into action and donate either your time or monetary means to an Indigenous organization every time you hear a land acknowledgement like this one. We do have a QR code right by the sign and the masks that can give you more information about that. Brief business, please silence your phones at this moment if you have not already. Caveat, you can take pictures. I think it's encouraged. You can post it online. You can tag the store, tag people. It'd be great. And while you're doing that online, also check out our full events calendar. We have some more events coming up at the next week, as well as throughout August and September that are going to be great. The restroom is going to be available to you, and it is behind me. You cannot use it right now for obvious reasons, so please wait until after the event. And we will also have copies of both of our authors' books at sale up front at the registers, not at that back desk. So at the end, when there's after Q&A, do not go back there and ask me for a copy. I will not have one. But everyone up front will give you all the copies you want. And a special note on that note is when you buy a book, and hopefully today you will be buying Nina and Lewis's books, you're not just buying a book from us. You're not just supporting independent bookstores, but you're supporting writers like these two who work so hard to put all this work into it and give you something that's enjoyable to read. And you also could have a book, so that's the plus. All right. So first I'm going to introduce Lewis. Lewis Buzbee is the author of The Yellow Lighted Bookshop, 3 award-winning novels for younger readers, including The Steinbeck's Ghost, The Haunting of Charles Dickens, and Bridge of Time, as well as several others. His poems, essays, and stories have appeared in Lit Hub, Harper's, GQ, New York Times Book Review, Paris Review, Zezeba, and elsewhere. A new novel, Diver, will come out next spring. All right. Nina Schuyler. Nina Schuyler's short story collection, In This Ravishing World, Why We're Here Tonight, won the W.S. Porter Prize and the Prison Prize for Climate Literature. I say give them applause right now. Her novel, Afterward, which is available up front, was published in 2023 and was named a top 100 notable book by Shelf Unbound and a top book by Alta Journal. Her novel, The Translator, won the Next Generation Indie Book Award for General Fiction and was a William Saroyan International Writing Prize finalist. Her novel, The Painting, was a NorCal Book Award finalist. Her nonfiction book, How to Write Stunning Sentences, is a bestseller. She teaches creative writing for Stanford Continuing Studies and the Writing Salon. She lives in California. Let's give them both a round of applause. I'm going to go away and dive into it.
All these years. Lewis is left-handed.
Old man glasses. There you are, nice and fuzzy out there now. Welcome everybody.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, that's all I want to say.
Okay. I'm so delighted to be here tonight to talk to Nina about her new a collection of linked stories in this ravishing world. If you ever get onto the whole Nina Schuyler, Lewis Buzbee scavenger hunt, I'll give you a clue. Nina and I have both taught off and on at the University of San Francisco in the MFA program. And if you go to the first floor of the Gleason Library, which is where all the computer banks are for the kids, there are 2 giant posters, about 4 feet by 3 feet. There's one of each of us, and they're right next to each other. And they both say read at the top. And we're both holding a book that we just published. So, you know, when you take that tour, that's a good place to start.
Well, and there's one more thing you should add, is that I'd been working at a newspaper and a magazine during the day, and I decided I need to write fiction. I need to learn how to write fiction. So I took a Berkeley extension class. He was my professor.
I was not her professor. I was her teacher.
Oh, brother, we're in the title. You felt like a professor to me.
And I taught her nothing, but I don't think I screwed anything up.
You taught me a lot.
I want to give you a bit of an overview of the new book before we hear Nina read from the book. So, In This Ravishing World is a collection of linked stories, as I said, and it's centered around the undeniable fact of climate change, and it's all set here in the Bay Area. The characters throughout here, there are many characters throughout here, include an environmental activist and lawyer who had just won the prestigious Goldman Prize, a middle schooler who roams the streets at night for free stuff, but he will only take stuff on the sidewalk that says free on it, a ballet dancer, a microbiologist, a 1%er who is contemplating building a bunker in New Zealand so that at least his family will be safe, a computer coder who has not seen the sun in decades, and many others. These characters are all connected by blood, by friendship and love, by random meetings, and of course they're all connected by the simple fact that they live, as we all do, on a planet that is imperiled. The narrator for the book throughout is nature herself. So Nina, would you please read something?
First of all, thank you so much for coming. It's very moving to me to look out and see all these faces and your interest in reading and books and being here and thinking a little bit about climate change and also the making of a book. So thank you. I wanted to start there. It's very meaningful. I want to introduce you into the voice of nature, and I think we'll talk about why I made this move, and what was the inspiration for it. But I struggled with this voice. What is the voice of nature, as you can imagine? And this is what I came up with, in the beginning at least. The human ear can hear a sound wave as low as 20 hertz, the lowest pedal in a pipe organ, or pick up a pitch as high as 20,000 hertz, a soprano singer C7. This might be the problem. I don't speak in your range. If I say the world can give you more than it should, do you hear me? Or the air will become so sluggish, so hot and heavy, clogged with pollution, eyes watering, burning, a constant cough, constant sickness, malaria, dengue, cholera. Or the sunlight filters through a green oak leaf on a hot June day, revealing an inner map of light green veins that lead to another shade of green, one that speaks to something deep inside, something that only green soothes. Or in the west, the land is so dry, the cracks scribbled in dirt spell the word desperation. Or ask, what do you care about? Or you will miss everything, always, painfully. Or what do you owe an egret, a jaguar? Do any of these words spring up in flame? Maybe I need to say something comforting so you relax, and the words slip in like beautiful music. I've heard humans can't stare directly at it. It's like looking at the sun. How about once upon a time, a man and a woman had a child. They lived in a little house with a stone fireplace and a yard filled with Queen Anne's lace. Then one day, something terrible happened. I've been trying to speak to you for years, and despite wildfires, droughts, and floods, I haven't gotten through. I know it's enormous and terrifying, and I wish I could think about dirt and new leaves sprouting, horses galloping in open fields, and spider webs woven in a rickety fence. Such fragility and all this wonder. For you, there are infinite ways to fill your ears with melody and money, loneliness and love and envy. Stories, so many stories. You stuff your ears with romance, affairs, falsehoods, jokes, trivia, and mysterious struggles between humans. Amazing what the human ear attends to, and what the ear is flush with swims through the brain like a fish. or so I imagine. The other day I heard someone say, nature will have the last laugh, but I don't want it. We're enmeshed. We've always have been, tightly knitted together, whether you like it or not. Our lots are cast together, and as things have become more urgent, we become even more entangled. Fine threads connecting us, billions of them. I'm not sure what to do because the alarm bell is ringing. Do you hear it? I know the sound waves are in your frequency. What you listen to matters because each sound creates a visual pattern. Note A's pattern, for instance, is distinct from D minor's, which is different from C's, like matchless snowflakes. And most astonishingly, sound waves can change matter. Water, blood, salt, oil, and fire, like wind-blowing waves and sand. Maybe other voices are needed, human voices, a chorus of joy and terror, hope and despair and pleasure, someone honey-mouthed and persistent, someone full of sorrow, uttering the words catastrophe and cataclysmic, a voice angst-ridden and hopeful, others scrambling to escape the despair of being human, another self-absorbed and surprisingly attuned to others, someone who loves freely and deeply anything that isn't human. Maybe these other voices will have sound waves you can hear. Maybe they'll rearrange you. Hello, hello. Tell me, can you hear me? Please climb down the stairs and open the door. So that's nature. Should I read a little human voice?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So here's a human. Brethren and sistren, a little nod to Faulkner. They've been grinding forever. Evil Bank of Union gave them hella money to find the holes in their security system. Didn't take long to find gaping chasms that tunneled right to pure, unencrypted data. Booyah, so fucking easy. The bank bozos were like, how did you? Can you fix it? Yeah, we can fix it, morons. Just pay us, dude. Adam winks at Raj. You look like shit, bro. Hair standing straight up like barbed wire, a green tone to your face. Didn't you wear that red plaid shirt yesterday? Ah, thank you, big man. Adam rings the big gong. Time to play some ball. From his chair, Raj throws the basketball at the hoop, misses by a long shot. Dean picks it up. Nice fadeaway, makes a shot. Whoa, sick. Han isn't playing. He's pounding red licorice. Adam hurls the ball at the wall, catches it, runs to the hoop, misses. No hops, says Raj. Don't talk to me about hops, bro, says Adam. Your legs are ass. Don't need legs, says Raj, tapping his temple. I've got this beautiful thing. Wrong, says Dean, grabbing the ball. Breakaway layup. Adam laughs, chomps a donut. Adam started coding at age 7. He's an old man at 22. Went to Princeton, but dropped out after a year because the the United States of fucking America, paid him a shitload of money to find the holes in the DOD system. Found 21. They said no way. He said yes way. Ultra top secret general. The US of A threw money at him and told him to hire a crew, Raj, Dean, and Han, to rectify the situation. 10 months of solid butt grinding work. They built it airtight. That was 3 years ago, and now they're working for the bank and a host of other evil corporations. They will take that money, support themselves, and support the revolution when it comes around. Raj didn't even bother with college. At the ripe age of 14, he built an app that found the closest and cheapest hotel room based on the user's zip code. Hookups, he was thinking. His teen body jacked on hormones and porn. Expedia liked his thinking and paid him $8.5 million. So tell me, why go to college? His parents smiled, patted him on the back, and he paid off their mortgage. Financially, he, like Adam, is set, but he's not one to lounge on the couch of life. He's a doer, a maker, a self-made man living a self-made life. He's a god with the computer. He dreams in code. The computer is the entire world sitting on his desk, only fingertips away. One more, says Raj. I gotta make it or your buns, says Dean. Raj pushes back his chair, shoots, swish. Whose buns?
So I'm always interested in knowing the origins of a book, how it comes to a writer. John Irving outlines every single scene in a novel before he begins writing it at all. And Joan Didion would take an image she saw in a Las Vegas casino and make it into a novel. So I'm really interested how this book came to you and in what ways.
I have a couple friends who are scientists, and they're in the environmental world, ecology and climate change scientists. And I was walking with one of them, and she was basically in despair and didn't know what to do. She'd done everything she could to try to solve climate change, worked on the irrigation problem, worked on river problem, on pollution problem. And so I have a BA in economics. And so she had me meet one of her friends, an environmental economist who was also working with corporations, and talked to me about her work. And so I started getting the idea of Eleanor. So she was the beginning. Eleanor is 70 years old, and she spent her 50 years trying to convince corporations to internalize external costs. So external costs are basically pollution. Anything you dump in the water, the soil, the air, it's called an external cost. It doesn't go on the balance sheet. So most companies are now regulated to have to do that, but in the 70s and 80s, there was no regulation. They didn't have to do it. And we keep getting up cases where that's still going on. So I wrote about 50 pages of Eleanor, and I said, this isn't going to work because I am in a causation plot model with a single hero on a trajectory, and the climate crisis isn't going to be solved by a single hero. I have to have a structure that matches the problem. So then the idea, it's like I need a whole chorus of voices. So even though Eleanor started it, it's like, I have to have a lot of different views. I need the madness of humanity and all the motivations and desires of people in all these different professions, all in the Bay Area, to try to capture what is going on at the human level, not just through a single hero journey. It's called a causation plot. So I found John Gardner, he calls it thematic juxtaposition. So you have a theme as your axis, and then the characters rotate essentially, or provide prisms into the theme. So the theme is the climate change. You can put anything in your theme. And then you develop, different ways of looking at the theme. It's like, okay, I'll come at it that way. So that got me suddenly, Eleanor had children. So Ava comes along, and she's a scientist who's they're studying it now, bacteria that eats plastic. And she's trying to get the bacteria to eat the plastic quicker. Mm-hmm. So, and that's what they're doing. Like, maybe we need a synthetic plastic or bacteria because we can't get the bacteria to eat fast enough. And then she has a son, Ed, who's a ballet dancer. And I read an article that more and more climate change kind of funding is coming along for art to now embrace climate change and come up with different ways to look at it. So Ed, her son, has been given a lead role to perform a performance that he has to inhabit the consciousness of a rat. And on stage with him will be another ballet dancer who has to inhabit the consciousness of a cat. So this was all based on my studying object-oriented ontology. So that's Graham Harman's philosophy. Anyone know Triple O? No, he's shaking hands. So basically it's thinking that objects are inexhaustible. Inexhaustible means you can't possibly know everything about an object. Even this microphone, you can't possibly know it all. But we walk around the world assuming we know everything about objects and other than humans. We think we know. So this movement of trying to inhabit another object and vacate the human-centric world is what the effort is in the art performance, in the ballet performance. And then more characters started emerging because of the Bay Area. So you heard about Raj, who's a coder. So I once lived with a coder who'd code for 16 hours a day. He'd code to the point that he had to cover an eye because he lost sight in an eye. It's like, you also encountered, I hope no one here is a coder, right? Maybe there's a coder that knows about nature. Yeah. But that was the beginning. Then the characters started proliferating. And then I heard Governor Gavin Newsom say, He's in the middle of a wildfire that's burned out a whole forest, and it looks like a moonscape, and everything's black, and it's like nature's talking. And I was like, oh my God, what's it saying? Can I make the imaginative leap to inhabit nature? And what would it say?
So all these characters come to you, but I mean, there's such a diversity of characters in here. And they represent the Bay Area in a lot of different ways. And I'm curious about how you see them connecting with one another. Some are, it's not like it's all of the characters are want to burn down Standard Oil, right? I mean, there's a whole diversity, and each one has a certain angle on climate change. So I'm wondering more about where these characters came from and how you made them connected, or how are they connected? Are they opposing? Are they reflecting?
Mm-hmm. So, well, some are biologically or blood related, right? We have the son and daughter of Eleanor, and then Eleanor is wandering one night in Pacific Heights and runs into the 13-year-old boy, Lincoln, who lives in kind of an urban, blighted area. And he's out looking for free stuff and also loves to run at night. And they have this encounter on the street. So how they're connected is that, when you create something, you don't want to duplicate. So everybody has a different response to climate change. Like Lincoln, who's living in probably the Western edition, wants to bring more nature to that area. So I'm talking or thematically pointing to the fact that we talk about income inequality, but we don't talk about nature inequality. That there's a correlation between poverty and no nature around. So kind of putting that in there, but in a story form. And then there's Hugh, who is across the Golden Gate Bridge, and again, wants to buy land in New Zealand to escape. Everywhere I go, I hear people asking, where can I go? Where can I move? Well, I see nodding heads. Like, what won't be affected? Where can I move? So that's an ongoing conversation I keep running into as I head outside and listen to people. And a lot of rich tech people have bought up land in New Zealand because they think it's going to be not as impacted. They have a water supply, and, they're isolated, so maybe civil unrest won't be bad. I don't know, all the thinking. So, and I know tech guys, I know some tech guys, and they're all exchanging ideas on that. There's survival chat rooms. Like, what are you doing to prepare for essentially civil unrest and climate change as it upheaves all our paradigms? And they're one guy I know, he didn't want to depend on glasses, so he got his eyes fixed. So he doesn't have to walk around with glasses, because in case they get shattered, he won't be able to see. But that was in thinking about climate change and how he's going to manage it. Now, she gets a bunch of money. Eleanor does win the Goldman Environmental Prize. She doesn't want the money, so she gives it to Greenpeace. So that's an important fact. And I love Greenpeace. They're willing to do anything. Chain to the wall, go climb a tanker. Okay, sign me up. So whenever I have extra money, I give it to Greenpeace. It's like, okay, they'll do something. That's, my environmental, one of my environmental contributions, give it to Greenpeace. So that's a big part of the book, is that money went to Greenpeace. So when you read it, it's like, note that fact. And that's a kind of cohesive thing that's going to happen with Greenpeace.
And one of the characters in here, Raj, the coder, sort of randomly texts, he doesn't know it's a woman, but he texts this person, calls this person out of the blue. Because of all the coding that he's doing, they've opened up all these phone numbers and stuff, and they pick one at random. And what's odd is that they end up having this rather intense relationship only on the phone for like an hour or so. Mm-hmm. But I love the sort of intentional connections that they have, but also the random connections.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of it. Yeah, it is. Yeah, so, he makes they're dialing numbers just to see what's going on out in the world. They never leave the warehouse because they're all coding. And
he goes outside and he's like, oh my God, the sun is so bright. Yeah. I would love to hear you talk more about the voice of nature. In our conversations, I keep positing nature as a she, and you posit nature another way. But it's rather a gamble, I think, to say, oh, I'm going to now inhabit the voice of nature and speak for nature. Tell us what that was like and how you saw nature as this narrator, the character of this nature.
Well, let me go back. So I did a lot of thinking about this. So we're in realism literature now. So to find an anthropomorphized being in the middle of a realistic novel is odd. That's a big risk. Before realism, which took place, it really took hold at the late 19th century, which correlated to the Industrial Revolution, which correlates to when CO2 started going up. Literature turned its eyes human-centric. So the gaze in realism literature is human to human. Now, prior to realism, we had Romanticism, right? Shelley, Byron, they were personifying everything. Anthropomorphizing was part of what they did. But that was left behind, and what we've done under the realism umbrella is say anything with anthropomorphizing or the non-human as a character is either fantasy or science fiction. It's not serious literature. So we've now divided up into categories. What was once more holistic back in the Romantic period, which was 1800 to 1850. It kind of died as the Industrial Revolution took over. So then it got me thinking, well, okay, realism is correlated or connected to science. Science bans anthropomorphism. So if you're a scientist, you cannot name your subjects. If you're working with chimps, like one big brouhaha was Jane Goodall. She named the chimps, and all the scientists said, she's not a real scientist. So for a long time, her data was discounted because she called the chimps names. So, and she wasn't formally trained. So here she was kind of outcast because she was doing something that science banned. Well, then that got me thinking, I know this is a long response, that got me thinking that we need science, but if everybody is under the auspice of science, everything becomes an object to observe. So you have a major separation between the human and the other, right? It becomes an object. We can observe it, we can study it and look at the external factors, but don't assume anything human about it. And with that objectification comes a separation of human from nature. So I was more interested in building a bridge from human to nature. It's like, well, what's the best way to build a bridge? I think evolutionary-wise, sorry, I'm going on and on, we are still very human-centric, and we need to see human characteristics in the other to have some kind of care. That's just what I've come to my conclusion at this point, that we really care when we see the gorilla nursing the gorilla baby like a mother, or playing with the baby chimp like you would play with a child. It's like, oh, now I care about the gorilla. We really cared something about trees when Richard Powers took the research from a forest researcher, scientist, Sharon, I forgot her last name, and put it in the book, The Overstory. It's like, oh, trees are talking. So anytime I bring up The Overstory, it's like, oh, trees are talking. So, but that's anthropomorphizing, right? And then I did more research and discovered that, I don't know if you had this record playing in your childhood or whatever, the songs of the humpback whale, 1970. It's still a platinum record. It's the best-selling nature sound record still. Katie Payne and her husband, scientist, and she's a musician, decided to use the word songs intentionally. Not sounds, song. So that's a little gesture of anthropomorphizing the whale. It's singing. And then the songs became, the whale sounds were translated to human as songs. And then what that led to is legislation. So and back then in 1970, there was industrial whaling for getting whale blubber for lipstick and all this stuff. Whales were killed for. But the public outcry against that because of the record led to legislation and the banning of whale killing for that reason. So, but that was a move, right, toward anthropomorphizing. So I don't know if you wanted this long thinking of why I did it, but I wanted to try to build a bridge between the human world and nature, that you care. And because we're human-centric and human-focused, that seemed the way to do it. And maybe care will lead to action.
How is nature in this book feeling about humans?
In the beginning, when I first started writing, nature was really angry. It was really angry. I have a whole section in the back. I asked a scientist, like, what's the most marvelous thing you've learned? And she said, deep time. And that's a John McPhee term. And deep time is 4.5 billion years ago in the whole evolution of life. And I went through, there's a section of deep time. And the first single cell entity or being that formed, now the multi-cell, and now green plants, and then trees came, and on and on. And Darwin was pointing the way, right? We evolved from this long lineage. And so nature was very excited for humans with this big brain to come along, because it would know the heritage. It would know what it inherited. It has such a big brain. Of course it would look over its shoulder and say, my God, look what we've become now, from the chimps, the mammals, to us. Well, we didn't do that, so that was the rage. And although the planet, I keep hearing this from actually climate scientists, the planet's going to survive. Humans, are in trouble if we don't change our way, but the planet will go on. It's been destroyed twice, right, by a meteorite, and there was an earlier event, and it carried on. But look at the damage, and it's not just humans that are damaged by climate change. So that was the rage, and it's like nobody is going to listen to a rageful nature. So back off, And then I felt, just like it says in the beginning, it doesn't want to be here either in this situation. It doesn't want to feel the terror. It has a lot of compassion. It wishes it could escape.
It also has pity for the humans as well. Yeah.
So that the tonal range became much greater as I sunk in deeper into the voice. And what is this voice?
So all of the characters in this book are all aware of, as everybody is aware of, the deleterious effects of climate change. And everyone is, each of these characters is in some way distressed, but feeling completely hopeless. And so sort of a couple of questions coming at you. One, what can fiction do, given the enormity of this? And then, I'll ask that another time.
Okay. So when I talk to my scientist friends, they say information isn't working. We've given everybody all the information. Well, this is speaking to the head, to the intellect. So what fiction can do is speak to the heart and try to move people that way. And that's been, just as science has become objectified, and that's the focus, fiction is not. Fiction is about, experience and having the reader experience and feel. That's what we're making, feel machines here. Like, I want you to feel what it's like to be an environmental economist and feeling like your whole life you've wasted. It's kind of like when you write a novel of 5 years and then you have to put it in the drawer. And you wonder, like, what am I doing with my life?
No, there's nothing worse than that.
I want you to feel, Lucinda's here and all she wants to do is work with abandoned dogs. She doesn't really want to deal with the human world. It's like, but I want you to experience that. And the beauty of fiction is that through the sensory data that comes in, the smell, the sound, the touch, the taste, it's a direct link to the body. And what the body feels as a reader is undeniable reality. So we won't be arguing about, okay, what is the CO2 level right now? No. The body's saying, I don't want to lose the world. I feel the panic. I feel like I want to do something. So that's the beauty of fiction for me, is that it creates we're in such a divisive time, but when you have an undeniable reality that I experienced this, then you can't argue about it.
This is an inevitable question, I think. What can we do? I mean, you have a number of, all the characters are in here are trying to figure out, what can we do? How do we live in this? And can we change it? And are there actions I can take? And I'm really curious to hear from you. What do you think we can do? And on what sort of levels?
Okay. First of all, I love Rebecca Solnit's comment that the future is not yet written. And if you look at the Intergovernment Panel on Climate Change, which is a body of the United Nations, they always have 4 graphs. And it's all based on where we are now on CO2 emissions. If we do nothing, the graph is like this. Future 1. We're up to 4 Celsius beyond pre-industrial time when we said we'd only be 1.5. If we do, some alternative energy, more solar, cut back on fossil fuel emissions, the graph is here. Now we're about 3. If we do even more, we get off fossil fuels and, hydro and solar and everything else, we're lower. And then they have a graph where it's not that bad. So the future, we have to hold on to this. It's not yet written. But it's all determined on now, what we're going to do now. And then I found this great quote, and I wrote it down because it's really important. This is from Sarah Peach from the Yale Climate Connections. Talk is the fertile field in which cultural change begins. In its absence, it's impossible for a group of people to solve a problem. So we have to talk about it. And so my vision, someone said, what movement would you start now? Well, the movement I'd start now is that whatever groups you belong to, parents' clubs, church or synagogue or writers' group, you start talking about it. And you start saying, what can we do? So, and then there's we're in a lush area with environmental groups, tapping into an environmental group. I belong to the Climate Center in Santa Rosa, and they're all about alternative energy. So tap into an environmental group that's doing good work, and they'll send you every week I get, okay, we're making phone calls to this legislator about solar panels. We've been fighting PG&E for probably 2 years now, trying to get them not to charge people who have solar panels for putting energy back on the grid. They want to charge everybody. So we've been battling that forever. But find a group that is privy to all the legislation that's going on. There's a $10 billion bond on the November ballot that we need to pass. It's all going to climate change, addressing climate change. So, but within your groups where there's trust and care and, conversation, we have to start talking about it and what we can do. Maybe, every week I gather with a group and we write postcards to different legislators about the climate, the problem. So that's one thing.
And it really, for you, it comes down to legislation.
At this point, because we are where we are, there's all your little things that you do, change your light bulb, eat vegetarian, which is, try to cut back on meat because cows, consume a lot of water and they produce methane gas. And cut back on air travel. All those things make you feel morally good and you're doing something. So you have agency, which is important. You don't want to fall into despair because then you won't get out of bed. But we're at the point where it has to come through legislation and regulation. So now that means electing people to office that, one, believe in climate change and will do something about it.
So vote. And you all know what I'm talking about when I say that.
Yeah.
Do you have hope?
I have hope. I have hope because that future is not yet written. Also, I work with another environmental group. It's called Children for Change. So what we do is empower children to take roles we're trying to make little Gretas, essentially, full confession, and help them come up with the ideas and we help them enact it. So the last effort we did was write letters to Amazon to say, please recycle your boxes. They wanted to do it. It's like, why not? Why not? You drop all that stuff off, pick up the boxes, and go recycle them. So, and the model is there were two girls who wrote Kellogg's, and they were cutting down all the palm trees in an orangutan area, probably in Thailand. And they wrote Kellogg's a letter, and they said, oh, these two girls, like, you know, and they sent them like merchandise or something, and that wasn't good enough. So then these two girls got like 100,000 signatures to stop cutting down the palm trees, so the orangutans have a habitat to live in. It's like, then they flew the girls in and took pictures with them and said, soon we're going to do it. And they said, that's not good enough. And so then they got 1 million. I have it in the book. Then they have 1 million signatures, and they changed it. The girls wouldn't stop. And this is the energy of youth. So there's a little bit of, you know, Eleanor aging, and she ends up at with children. And I don't know if you follow the Sunrise Movement, but they're really out there doing good work. So the youth energy that is like, I don't want a future where it's all wood smoke and, fire and drought. So they're fighting. And there's a beauty in the naivete. There's a beauty in the innocence that Amazon will change its mind by a letter. They didn't. So we're going to have to do more, but they're willing to do more.
In the final scene of the book, and I won't give too much away, although I'm dying to, in the final scene of the book, it's a huge communal moment, and everything has come to a stop. You and I would just love to hear you, without giving it away, talk about that moment, because it seems to reflect where we are now.
Yeah. Well, we all experienced the stop with the pandemic. It was awful, but there was also amazing beauty in it. So my thinking, again, I made everything stop at the end, is that we need to rethink the definition of what progress is, because we're using metrics. The GDP is a metric to measure productivity. Well, if everything has to keep growing, right, and not measuring air quality, not measuring, water quality, not measuring happiness. Everybody always brings up, why can't we measure happiness? There is a country that does measure gross national happiness. We need to rethink what progress is. So having everything stop, so we pause, almost like the pandemic, but without, the threat of death at all times. And rethink, well, what should we be measuring? Because just like the tax code, whatever you measure, whatever is in regulation, that changes human behavior. So for the tax code, for instance, like for a long time, if you are married, it might still be the case that you get certain benefits versus if you're single. Well, that changes behavior, right? Go get married and you'll get the benefits. The same idea is behind this. It's like, well, if we measure something in society that isn't just increased productivity at all times, maybe it readjusts behavior.
I'd like to open up the floor to questions right now from anybody. Yes.
I have like a twofold question. One, you mentioned that things changed in the mid-19th century. There was the romanticism between 18 and 1850, and then it sort of came away. And I was curious if when you were researching, if that was intentional, if it was something that was driven, because I could see that at least in our world now, people being against and trying to stop you from, personifying, a lake that is destroyed by a company dumping chemicals in or things like that. So yeah, that's the first question. The second one.
Okay, hold on. So the question is, was it an intentional move to move from romanticism to realism? Was it an intentional move by a society?
You might have thoughts about it. I know I read Balzac said we need objective reality and we need to treat writing like a science, like a scientific endeavor. And we need realism to document, read Balzac, right? He's documenting everything. So what do you think?
I never think that anything like that is intentional, because that sort of implies one thing. For me, especially about the romanticism and the romantics and then into the Industrial Revolution, there's so many. This is what's frustrating about climate change. I feel like, I wish we could change something, but there are so many confluences coming together. There's the great wealth inequality right now, which isn't one person's fault. And so I don't know that it's intentional. And I think that's what's frustrating is I sometimes feel swept up in the river of history. And your other question?
Well, my other question was sort of just going to piggyback off of that. Did you find that there was any resistance to this idea when you wanted to publish stories about this? I mean, like, was there anything that you felt like you were having resilience against, kind of making this leap and trying to get people to feel versus just being like, this is what happened?
Yeah. So was there any resistance from the publishing world to getting these stories published?
Well, what I did was enter contests, right? So I think I entered 10 contests. So I kind of bypassed agents, I bypassed all of that and just said, let's see if this will work, if someone thinks it works. I didn't really know. In my writers group, I have a novel writing group, and someone said, I just think you should cut nature.
Yeah. Isn't that the problem?
Right, and solve the problem, right? Just cut it out. It's people aren't going to like it. It's too poetic at times. What's it doing in there? So there was pushback within. And I teach alternative plot, so I know once you deviate from a dominant paradigm, even in writing, you're going to get resistance, right? This doesn't fit. Most people have burned on their brain the Pixar spinal movement, right? That the shape of a story, and so when something moves off of it, you get resistance. I knew that. So the way I went around is like, well, I'll just enter contests to see if it appeals to anyone, and it matters to me, so I guess that's good enough. It's like at some point as a writer, you turn back to yourself, like, this matters to me, and I'm going to go with the passion over trying to read the market or do what the market says is good. And the market would have said cut nature out, and you'll have a better chance, right? Yeah. But
a better chance for a movie.
Yeah.
Although, J-Lo is nature. I'm just saying. Any other questions out there? Oh, sorry. Please go.
What you just said about, I'm going to just kind of bypass agents. And do you think that you would be able to write this kind of book if this was your first book? Because I feel like you have all these novels under your belt. You have this career, you have this level of confidence, so you can you could take those kinds of risks. What if you're like a brand new writer, or even not a brand new writer, but you like a never published writer? Do you think this is a book you could try to publish if you're a new writer?
I think so. I think the publishing industry likes new and different, right?
When they're not doing next, they do like new.
Yeah, when they're not doing derivative, right? And you always have to write that query letter like, this is like this. So already you've conflated pre-existing with new. It's like it's new sort of because it's like this that already exists. Your first opening of the query is like, I've collapsed the two. But they're looking for, the structure's out there. Think of There by Tommy Orange. So his axis is the urban indigenous world, and he's got all these characters swirling around it, and there's a big finale. Or think of Let the Great World Spin, Colin McCain's book, where the axis is 1970 New York, and the Philippe walking the type wire. So the idea of transcendence. So that's going to be the center, and then circle around all these characters. It goes way back to the 14th century, this model, to the Decathlon, I think it is. It's Decameron. They all got together and wrote about love. So there's all these little stories about love. So every model, if you start digging around, it's like it already exists.
Yeah,
there's nothing new. It's just I'm freshening it up and putting climate change as the axis.
Well, I would also just add, as someone who's been in the book business and the publishing world for a very long time, that publishers and booksellers are notoriously progressively liberal. Mm-hmm. It's really rare. You can pretty much say any progressive thing at a booksellers convention. And that's been part of the thrust of publishing. And so ever since Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, nature, what humans are doing to nature, has been a subject of vital interest. I think that now is a great time for that. And I think, as Nina was talking about, wanting to give it a fictional embodiment so that we feel it instead of just understanding it with our heads. And so don't ever let the market tell you not to write something. Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah.
So pretty clearly you can read the future. You're scary like that. So with afterwards you were on AI before the rest of the public knew about it. And I know this took a while to write, so you were on climate change maybe even before it was the top of the headlines thing. So I'm a little afraid to ask, what's next? What are you focusing on? What are you
So the question is, what's next for Nina in terms of her writing and her focus? But I also want to just tag onto the early part of it and say Nina's previous book, which just came out like 2 days ago, was it a year ago? Yeah. Afterward is an incredible book about AI, and it hit just at the time that suddenly we were all talking about AI. So she had been working on it for, I assume, a few years before. So Afterward is really a book that is also as timely as this book is. So what's next?
Well, my focus is still on, I'm calling it the other than human. So I'm fascinated by and intrigued by the other than human, and I keep reading about it. I'm just watching what I keep reading and what my passion is. The recent book I'm reading is a combination of AI and science, and I just have to say this, that a nonfiction book by Karen Bacher. She recently died, unfortunately, but what she's been doing is combining AI and digital recordings of animals, that the sound, the human ear can't hear it, but the recorder picks it up, and then uses video. So it combines these elements, puts all the sound into a large language model machine, AI, and it looks for patterns. And what they're starting to discover, the human ear can't hear it, but bats are talking. Bats are speaking to each other in their echolocation, their vibration, and they have names for each other. They actually, when they mimic the sound, a certain bat will come. Bees are speaking to each other. Elephants have names for each other and they're talking. Coral reef are talking. They now have digital recorders under the ocean and they're picking up the sound that the coral is talking to each other and sharing resources. So in some ways, this idea of anthropomorphizing is being put under the realism umbrella, that what we thought, they don't talk. Descartes said, one of the key things about humans is that we have language. We just don't hear their language, right? It's out of our range. But probably everything is talking. Plants are talking to each other now. So, you can call it anthropomorphizing, but as science discovers these, especially through AI now, and hearing the patterns and correlating the patterns, it seems like anthropomorphizing is under the umbrella, and it's not anthropomorphizing anymore. So I find this all fascinating. So I'm going down this other trail of following more other than humans and writing stories about them.
There's an online question.
Oh, there's an online question.
Yeah, the question is, can you say the name of the organization about children and climate change that you mentioned?
Yeah.
Just expand it.
Children for Change. And I think if you look online, they use the number 4. So if someone had taken the name. And right now we're in schools, different schools. So I think we're in 6 schools over in the North Bay right now. But it's ways to organize children and give them the tools. Or probably 2-3 times a year we drive up a van to testify in Sacramento about legislation, and the kids testify. It's not us. We just drive them and say, "You're going to do fine." Go talk to them. So So they're trying to groom new Gretas. So.
And then
Man.
two, so over here and then over here. Yeah.
I found your answer to, the process of finding nature's voice so interesting and obviously so intellectualized. And I was wondering, when you're actually putting it down on the page, how much of it stays in your brain before you decide the direction you're going, and how much is trial and error on the page?
So when it comes to the voice of nature, how much of it is trial and error on the page, or at what point did you find that voice to be coherent?
I think it's all trial and error, writing to discover, just sink in. There's a lot of writers in the room, sinking in that deep place. What does it feel like? Is this the right feeling that I want to create? Is this right? But like when I discovered and researched deep time, it's like that gave me. Nature has such a different lens. We're like 19 seconds in deep time. The human appearance on 4.5 billion years. So it's like, my God, it would have such a different way of being and be able to hold so much. Imagine you lived that long. Imagine you lived even 200 years. You'd have so much capacity for everything, to care, to feel. You've been through so much, right? So then once I understood that, it's like, oh, it's a big container. It's it can contain everything. So that, I read about it, but then I had to throw a lot of pages out till I got some sound and made it. It's the only first person voice. Everything else is in close third. And I wanted that intimacy of nature, just talking in your ear. Like that opening, like, can you hear me? Is this voice reaching you? Well, you'll have to tell me if it works. I mean, is it a voice that speaks to you? It is, it's an invention, right?
And the last question over here.
Well, thanks so much. It's been just a great to hear y'all talk about this. I was really fascinated, like Allie was, about your conversation, or just talking about the shift from like romanticism to modernism, and how your book is a little bit pushing back or reclaiming romanticism in some ways. So I'm just curious, like, as we now grapple with the failures of the Industrial Revolution, and climate change and all of the kind of AI and everything else that we are grappling with currently, do you feel like there's kind of like romanticism to modernism and modernism to like something now that's a little bit different, specifically within like literature in a broad sense? Like, is there a change that you see coming in terms of how we view literature, view life through that lens, that's maybe a little bit different than this kind of Industrial Revolution inspired?
So the question is, Nina had suggested that there was this movement from romanticism in the early 19th century, then to realism, then to modernism. Is there a movement that's in some way going to be a response to what you call the failure of the Industrial Revolution? Which I don't think it's failed. I think it's done in it's part of the problem.
I think it's inevitable because people like you care. Writers, sensitive people care. And they're picking up that it can't be a human-centric world. It isn't. And so how do you even personification could widen the lens of a realism story that, even that would be a gesture to away from human exceptionalism, away from, human-centric writing at all times. So I think it's inevitable as toward the end, Eleanor says something like, the fish don't realize they're swimming in water until the water disappears. And it's somewhat like that, what's happening. Like, wait a minute, we were swimming so well in this atmosphere, in this planet, but now we have wildfires and droughts and immense heat. As I was driving over here, on the radio, it's like, well, we need the body to adapt to immense heat. Like, you have to go out a little bit more into the 110-degree weather. so that your core heat won't go up to 110 or whatever. So you have to start adjusting. It's like, we weren't in that world, 10 years ago. But the water, like the fish without water, we look around, I'm like, wait a minute. I want the air. I want the trees. So now we're aware of the water. And in that awareness, like, how can you value it or show that it is a being as well and alive? I didn't mention indigenous culture and indigenous storytelling. It's been there all along. Animism has. It's still there. So they 90% of that population was destroyed by Western civilization, but they've continued those stories. And if you go to indigenous storytelling, it's all animism. I have a couple friends that they go sing to the mountain because the mountain has given them so much. It's like, really? Up in Sonoma, you go sing to that mountain? It's like, yeah. Imagine if you walk around and everything's alive, and that's how you view the world, not dead or an object. So once you start, that's what's been happening to me. It's like, I feel like I'm vibrating at a different frequency now. Like everything feels alive. And what can I do? I can't kill a spider anymore. It's like I have to wrap it in a little napkin and take it out. My kids are like, Mom, a spider. And I'll go do it and carry it out. So I think it's inevitable that, now that we're so aware of the potential loss.
Thank you all for coming. Let's give Nina a big hand.
Thank you.
Let you take over.
Next. One more round of applause.